Good morning, Grinders. Welcome to DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka BlenderEd, Blender HD, if you want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Friday, June 10th. So you know what we do on Fridays? It's Fighting Fridays. We're fighting each other on Fridays. Maybe we are. Are we fighting each other in the YouTube chat? I have no idea. Suki Singh here. Early as usual. Hog Lawrence here as well. Good morning. Hit the thumbs up button on your way in the door. Helps us out. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. If you're coming here for baseball stuff, we got Grinders Live later today. We got Crunch Time. We got a FanDuel strategy video for premium members. If you want to subscribe to RotoGrinders Premium, I would suggest you do the combo premium package. Because you get baseball, you get MLB, you get basketball, you get NBA. You get golf, PGA. You get to play PGA. You get MMA, right? You get MMA. We recorded a 2-hour podcast, the Ground and Pound podcast, and that's behind the paywall, RotoGrinders Premium. The expert survey for MMA should be coming out later today. We got some MMA projections. We got to change some of the ownership. One of the fights got canceled. So subscribe to RotoGrinders Combo Premium. Click on that link in the description, and you get $10 off your first month. But like I mentioned, the Manel Cop Rogerio Bontorin fight has been scrapped. Bontorin was 4.5 pounds from making weight and then had to go to the hospital. I don't think he should be cutting to 125. He probably should be fighting at 135. And now that fight is off. So now we're down to an 11-fight card. And the less fights that go down, the less I like the slates, right? The less uniques, the more duplication there tends to be. Less options. Now there's only 22 fighters to choose from. Obviously, there'll be sub 1% on some the 2 canceled fights, right? You'll see 0.4% on it's okay. So there's a little bit of rake reduction. People forget to change their lineups or whatever. But now Cop was 9,200 and Bontorin was 7,000. So now that creates an even bigger gap between Valentina Shevchenko at 9,600 and the next price fighter at 9,100. There's a $500 gap right there. So if you're rostering Shevchenko, I mentioned this on the podcast, okay? Because it's going to be a talking point around the MMA community, DFS community, about Shevchenko. Okay, for $500 more, obviously that curtails your lineup a little bit because you're paying a lot for Shevchenko. Is she going to score enough points? Okay, she's in a 5-round fight. She's in the co-main event, right? 5 round. There's 2 5-rounders on this slate. She's a minus 550 favorite. I didn't update the odds for today, but I don't think anything has dramatically changed. I did last night. Minus 85% win probability. 43% inside the distance within 5 rounds, 19% in the first round. Her metrics, she's not just a striker. She grapples, she does everything. Okay, so if this fight goes 5 rounds and she wins, she probably puts up 100 plus points, right? Now, people will make it a point to say that Taila Santos is much more physical than Shevchenko's past couple of opponents, but Santos's strength of schedule is a little bit suspect, beating Wood, beating Jillian Robertson, Molly McCann, Modafferi. Like, it's okay. The people on the down swings of their career, and Shevchenko is a humongous step up. I mean, she's arguably the greatest pound for pound fighter in women's MMA history. So the likelihood, if Shevchenko wins, she probably puts up 100 plus points. Okay. She probably does. Now, you're going to be like, well, she has to beat out Choi. She has to beat out Allen. She has to beat out Jiri, right? The guys right underneath her for much less, right? Choi's 9,100, Allen's 9,000, Jiri's 8,900. And Jiri's the favorite in the main event 5-rounder. But that fight, I'm not sure it goes past round 2, right? I think either Jiri knocks out Glover or Glover that implements takedowns, gets him down on the ground within the first 2 rounds and submits him. It's going to be one of the two. Probably doesn't last 5 rounds. But most likely that Prochaska Glover fight, the winner puts up about 100 in those also. Now, people will say, well, if Choi puts up, let's say Shevchenko only puts up 105 or something like that. 105. And then Choi puts up 110. Or Allen puts up 110. Jiri puts up 110, something like that. On an 11-fight card, especially, now that we got Kopp gone also at 9,200, it all depends on what the underdogs do on this slate. Now, I love these types of slates where outside of that Shevchenko-Santos fight, these fights are much closer than we don't have multiple minus 400, minus 500 fights. We don't have a minus 1,200. We don't have like Romanov on that slate, minus 1,800 or something like that. So even Brendan Allen is the next biggest favorite currently at a 75% win probability, right? So his opponent is Malkoun down here at plus 250. But I mean, look, like Kulabau is plus 190. Whenever I see like a plus 1, like those are close enough fights. Those are 2-1, 66-33 types of fights. And other than the Shevchenko fight, pretty much all of them are that. Can you really trust Brendan Allen? Yeah, he's a minus 300 favorite, but I wouldn't be shocked if Malkoun won, spamming takedowns. So it's like all these other fights in outside of the Shevchenko fight, I could see the dog winning. Right? I have in my expert survey on this slate that there's a good likelihood that there are 4+ underdogs that win on this slate. Now, whether or not they put up a lot of points, that's a different story. But I could see Emiev beating Madalena wrestling. I could see Kang wrestling and not getting knocked out by Dana. Machate is kind of, Steve Garcia is no one to trust. So Machate could win, knockout, something like that. Jake Matthews, could take Fiallo down. Liang Na possibly should be the favorite in this fight against Silvana Gomez Juarez. Pascual, and I mean, Edwards is nothing to write home about. And Pascual, not a good fighter, but she has takedowns. Joanna is a former champion, and obviously Joanna Weili could be a very close fight. Glover could obviously, take Jiri down and submit him. Malkoun spam takedowns against Allen. Kulabau has enough durability, maybe, and punching power. Maybe he could possibly knock out Choi. I mean, I could see a lot of underdogs winning on this slate. Now, on a slate where not many if you're on the other side of the spectrum, if you go, I'm not sure if there's any dogs that win, then it's more concerning about what Shevchenko's score is going to be. Okay, so understand that. Okay, so if we don't have any, let's say for instance, one underdog wins. We get one. Liang Na is the only underdog that wins. Now, the only way to get like 600+ points in your lineup is you want 6 winners, the 6 highest, the highest scoring winners. So in order to get Na in your lineup and then 5 favorites, you probably you can't use Shevchenko. So if Shevchenko doesn't beat out Choi, Allen, Jiri, people underneath them, she ain't making the optimal lineup in a situation where only one dog wins. I mean, we could even run them, right? Let's do that. Let's run it. I'm going to take out, and let's use that exact situation. I'm going to take out all the dogs other than Na, to use that as an example. I'm going to use Glover as an example, because anyone is an example, but let's just say Na. I think she's going to be a popular underdog play. Okay. And then we try to make lineups with Na there. So let's see. Can we make a ton? I'm going to put 300. Build. I don't even think we can make that many. If Na is the lowest scoring, right? You can't even fit Shevchenko in, right? That's too cheap, right? That's the like who's the highest price guy you could even fit in? Brendan Allen, one lineup. Okay, so this is a perfect example of like Shevchenko can't fit into these lineups. Let's say that Glover, so he's cheaper, 7,300, right? So we're going to take out Na, okay, and let's see what combinations. If he was the only underdog that won, I'm going to start trying to build lineups. 30 lineups. Only 30 lineups exist like that, and Shevchenko's in none of them. Oh, I also have Cop in there. Okay, I gotta get rid of God. Okay, we got to get rid of him. So that's 2 less lineups. So it should be 28 lineups. Yeah, here we go. 28 combinations. None of them with Shevchenko, right? The high you get 4 Choi lineups. So it's very hard. Can Shevchenko be in a lineup with only one underdog? Let's do it this way. Let's use groups to experiment. Okay. So I'm going to take out Cop, take out Bontarine for now. And I'm going to make a group with all the dogs. Okay, to make this a little bit easier on ourselves. Let me get this on my other screen. Okay, so I'm gonna make it just to make a group with all the dogs, right? Even Mma, who's 8,000 or whatever. Mma, Kang. Where's Kang? What happened to Kyung Ho Kang? He should be in there, right? Kyung Ho Kang. Young. Okay, that's better than Kang. Kang Mashate, Jake Matthews, Liang Na, Ramona Pasquale, Joanna, Glover, Malcoon, Kulabau, and Santos. Okay. So let's say, I'm just going to say, use exactly one, right, of these players. Just one underdog in your lineup. Okay. How many lineups exist with one underdog that has Shevchenko in it? I'll lock Shevchenko. Not like none. Because you can't play Santos. Right. So even with Kulabau, let me just take a look. Can you play, let's see, Shevchenko? I mean, it's kind of weird that I can't make any. I don't know if this is a lineup HQ error. So let's say you have Kulabau as your only. Yeah, you can't do this. Right? Because all the favorites would be Dana, 8,400. Yeah, you'd be $100 short. I mean, you can play Mma in this lineup. I mean, that's a second underdog. But yeah, it's impossible. I mean, essentially, you'd have to stack with Santos. So on a slate where only one underdog wins, Shevchenko, it's quite possible Shevchenko, even with 130 points, doesn't even make the optimal. On a slate where only one dog wins. So let's do 2 now. Okay, so I'm going to lock Shevchenko in. I'm going to go back to my player groups. And I'm going to say, 2 dogs. Right? Exactly 2. But 2 dogs win. Now, I don't know what their scores are, right? I mean, that may matter. But let's run lineups now with Shevchenko in and 2 dogs. We're going to get We're going to get a bunch of lineups. But what do these lineups look like? Most are going to spend most of the salary. Also, we had our salary minimum as nothing, so we could leave tons of money on the table. But exactly 2 dogs. This is going to run about 300 lineups. I think there should be more combinations of that. But a lot of these lineups are going to have 2 very low dogs. Okay, so let's run 300. We got 300 run. It's going to pop out. Okay. So we take a look at salary high and low. Let's see, salary high to low. Okay. So here we go. So you got Shevchenko, Edwards, Gomez, Juarez, Fialio, then Joanna and Malkoun in this lineup. So you're getting a lot of mid-range. So you pretty much can't use like Emiev, you're barely getting as the second underdog. You're barely getting any Choi or Allen, right? It's very hard to play Shevchenko and then another 9K fighter. But let's look at these Jiri lineups. Okay. Valentina, Jiri, Steve Garcia, Della Maddalena. Like, don't play that. This is a dupe lineup. This is going to be duped a million times. A million or whatever. Like, that's what I would suggest. You know, people, essentially the two main event, if you're playing two main event fighters, especially Valentina plus Jiri, you're dramatically decreasing the amount of combinations that are available. And then especially when you put in a 40% owned Steve Garcia and a 20 to 30+% owned Della Maddalena. Like, if we could take a look on the combo calculator, right? We go on the combo calculator now. Let's take a look at that. So if we wanted to play these fighters, let's say we wanted to lock in Shevchenko, Jiri, Steve Garcia, and Della Maddalena. Like, you have 7,450. Like, how many combos? I mean, this is stupid. Like, how many combos could there possibly be? 10. There's 10 combos of those fighters. And if we just even, I think Della Maddalena is going to be higher than 25% owned. But even if we just go by this, 49, 46, 41, 25. 49, 46, 41, 25. And we have 10 combinations. Like, look how many, what's the average dupes in the large field GPP? 76. Do not play this lineup. This combination could encapsulate 2% of all the entries in the contest. Now, can you play this type of lineup possibly in the 555? Yes. It's a very chalky lineup, but you still can. So these are the things that you should be concerned yourself about on an 11-fight card, more than who's going to win the fights. What combinations do I not use? Those one underdog type of lineups, I'm not sure if there's any that are going to be unique. Unless it's a weird, like a fight stack type of thing that barely anyone does. But even if you play, let's say we take away Della Maddalena, and we just have the top three, 49, 46, 41, these three. How many combinations? Average remaining salary is only 7,700, so I'm not even sure we could even build 300 combinations of that. So we just have those three fighters up here. Let's see what combination. That could be about 9% of the total contest entries. 26 combinations. This is even with leaving money on the table. Like, look, here's a 49-4 line, because you can't leave. How much money can you leave on the table? You're spending a lot of it up top. So 26 lineups, right? We put in 26 combinations. Average dupes 117. So to me, this is a recipe for, especially if you're playing large field GPPs, to just put Valentina Shevchenko, Yuri Prochazka, and Steve Garcia in a group and say max 2. I mean, you could do max 1, but definitely max 2. I think, look how many combinations. There's only 26 combinations available when you have these three fighters in your line. Like, look, even in the 555, you're most likely going to be duped once. And that's only a 400-person contest. So I would scrap this combination, and pretty much in any contest, other than cash games. Sure, that would be the combination you play in double, right? Don't play a cash lineup in GPPs. So that's what I like doing. It's not necessarily like who's under-owned, who's over-owned. Like on my sheet, one of the first things I do, especially Friday night, Saturday morning, is just go through the combinations that I should be avoiding. Those high-owned combinations. So Shevchenko, Prochazka, whatever, Jiri, Steve Garcia. But you see that if not many underdogs win, Shevchenko needs to put up a godly amount of points to be optimal. Now, let's think of it the other way around. And this is what I mentioned on the Ground and Pound podcast. What happens if a lot of underdogs win? Okay, let's say 4 underdogs win and put up a score that is decent enough, right? So let's go back to player groups and let's force in 4 underdogs. Okay. Now, obviously, you can make a lot more lineups with 4 underdogs because you're leaving money on the table a lot. So if I'm going to run 4 underdog lineups, okay, the median Shevchenko's median projection is the highest, and it shouldn't. Okay, so we're going to run 300 lineups, and we're forcing in 4 on underdogs. Okay, so even at the worst case scenario, like if we just played the 4 highest priced dogs, we would still have 9,300 remain. If we're playing the 4 highest priced dogs, you could still play Shevchenko and Allen in that lineup. You couldn't play Shevchenko and Choi. That's the only combination that you couldn't play. Right? So the fact that you can play Shevchenko even with the 4 highest priced dogs means that any lineup with 4 dogs in it, other than this one with Choi, you could fit Valentina in. Right? You're not going to be locked out. So look what happens when we do that. Okay, so we're forcing in 4 dogs into our lineups. And I'm going to build 300 and let it run. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the YouTube chat. Give me those thumbs ups. I know Swolfdab is here. No, Swolfdab. On Fridays, we talk about MMA, UFC DFS on this show. You can find out everything you want about MLB later today on Grinders Live. Crunch Time, which is free, presented by FanDuel. Obviously, you subscribe to RotoGrinders Premium. You get all the projections and all. The cheese is good, right? His $1 Million Musings. You get the grind down. You get everything. You get everything you want. So if you want the baseball stuff, especially this early, I would suggest subscribing to RotoGrinders Combo Premium or just Baseball Premium. This is kind of like the free MMA content. Okay, so look, I ran 300 lineups, forcing in 4 dogs. Valentina comes up in 94% of the lineups. Okay. And if we take a look at the, okay, I sorted by, I don't want just the Prohaska lineups. Go by salary, high to low. There's only 2 $50,000 lineups that exist like this. Right? All these lineups leave money on the table. Right? So I built 300 lineups. Only 2 use the entire salary, even though they still contain Valentina Shevchenko. And then we have the lowest lineups out of the top 300, at least, leaves 2,500 on the table. That's Santos in it. Santos, Pascual. Let's see. Can we find ones? Here's one. Leaves 2,100 on the table. Has 2 main event fighters, Valentina Shevchenko and Glover Teixeira. That's Steve Garcia, Kyung-Ho Kang, Pascual, Malkoon. Based on the inside the distance lines, I can't put it past. This lineup leaves 2,100 on the table, and I don't think this is a crazy lineup. This really isn't. It really isn't. If you told me that this was the optimal lineup, and all these guys, put up 100 points, I would not be shocked at all. And it includes a $9,600 fighter. Because all Valentina, in the case where there are 3+ underdogs, but definitely 4+, in the case there are 4+ underdogs that win, all Valentina needs to do is put up a top 3 score in raw points. That's it. With 3 dogs winning, top 3 could be fine. Top 2 would be better. She doesn't have to put up the highest score. People are going to say, oh, she's going to have to put up the highest score. No, she doesn't. Just in raw points, she may be fine. So let's say, for instance, Choi puts up, like, out of these 4, we'll go by the top 4. Shevchenko puts up the 3rd highest score out of these 4. Or let's just, she beats out 2 of these. So let's say Jiri puts up 105. Allen puts up 112 against Malkoon. Choi puts up like 98 and it doesn't matter. And Shevchenko puts up 107, right? So Shevchenko beats out Prochaska, doesn't beat out Allen. But then what happens if Liang Na has 110 points? What happens if Jake Matthews has 100 points? What happens if Prochaska doesn't win? Well, what happens if Glover wins? So now that knocks out one of these guys. So Shevchenko could have the second or third highest score, but she's in the top 6 of scoring. So as long as she's in the top 6 of score, you're going to just need her raw points. This is because the winning lineup is going to leave money on the table anyway. So the extra $500 ain't going to matter if if underdogs win and Valentina is at least in the top 6 scores. She's going to be the optimal lineup. If 3 to 4 underdogs make the optimal lineup with 100 plus score, you're going to want the highest raw points for the rest of your lineup. And the likelihood of Valentina putting up the highest raw points on the slate, especially now that Kop's gone, so it removes one other favorite, is very high. So now if you're building lineups with only one dog, only 2 dogs, yeah, I could see the logic of like she really needs to significantly beat out Choi, Allen, Jiri, and all the people below her. But in the case where underdogs win a lot on this slate, Valentina could have 103 points and still make the optimal lineup as long as she's a top 6 fighter on the slate. And there's only 11 fights. This was a 15-fight card, that'd be different. But what are the chances of Valentina being a top 6 scorer on an 11-fight card? Pretty high, regardless of the salary. I just want to highlight that. Now, of course, on the Grinding podcast, Liam has an even, one hell of a take. He's better than Santos on the fight. You could watch. Go watch that. He thinks that the line should be but not as wide as it is with Shevchenko. But if all the metrics and all the betting lines are concerned, Shevchenko is the best raw point play on the slate. Grant Brown asked, do you mind discussing how you're simming MMA outcomes? I heard you mention it a few times, and I haven't sat down to build it yet. I can't show it to you because I do pretty much set it all up manually. I am awful in Excel. Okay. Now, I'm better than the average person. I have to do everything. I have to cut and paste and do things. It takes me a long time. I don't sim each slate out. I don't, because it would take too long for me to do. It's something that every, 2 months or something, I'll go back. I'll have the CSV from a previous slate and go, okay, let me put this all together, right? And it could take me 3 to 4 hours just to put together in order to simulate something. And typically something I screwed up somewhere, and then it takes me 3 or 4 hours to fix that, to figure out what's wrong, why these results aren't coming out correctly. So there's no way for me to show it. All I do is I do experiments. I don't sim out slates. So I do an experiment of the RO based on certain static scores, depending on the odds, the probability based on the closing line odds. I add a modifier for the projection. If on this person in decision wins scores a little bit more than others. And then I have what are the pay? What's first place and what's the split of it? And then I'll just run the lineups based on those probabilities. Then I could see the buckets. I could see users. I could just do it by user. Take someone else's 150 lineups. I could remove my 150 lineups and replace that with whatever. I could recreate lineups. And then just run it through and then see what I find. So I'm not simulating slates like today's, for tomorrow's card. It would take me too long to do. It would take anyone else probably much, much shorter. But me, I have to cut and paste. I have 17 sheets. I'm cross-referencing stuff, and then the cell numbers change, so I have to manually change all that. It's off. It's off. That's why I only do it every so often, just to experiment. I'll take the past couple of cards and go, okay, running this, running that. What's the simulated ROI based on my awful methodology to begin with? It's very flawed. So I'm not separating fighters into buckets of outcomes. I'm just doing it purely based on the betting lines. And then I'm adding a modifier to for their standard deviation. Like grappling heavy fighters are going to score more in decision wins than a KO artist, a guy that doesn't do much. So it has to account for that somehow. And then I run it and see what the scores are, right? And I try to make it as wide as possible because I think a lot of if you're going by median projection in MMA, I think you should just throw it out. I mean that's how little I think projections, normal distribution oriented projections are in MMA. That if you see a normal distribution projection for any fighter, it's useless. I think it's literally useless. I can just throw it out. But I feel very similarly in PGA as well. The golfers don't have two normal distribution, anywhere close to normal distributions of their outcomes. So we could see here, it's like, oh, Shevchenko, her median is 91. Here's the Choi is 71, 73. These distributions don't look normal at all. Della Maddalena has a median of 58. Does he score 58? I mean, none of these fighters score these points. You're going to see a heavily bimodal, wobbly, very wobbly, not barely even bimodal. You'll see bumps and humps and tails, right? Shevchenko is going to have a long tail in the top, very short in the beginning. She doesn't score. She rarely scores 0 to 5 points. You'll see Whaley. Whaley may have the most normal distribution, or Joanna, that fight is the most normally distributed fight. And that's not even normally distributed. So, I mean, that's the problem I find with projections in MMA. And on top of it, the fight data you're using, very small sample sizes and prone to overfitting. So I find that projecting MMA across the entire industry is very, very flawed. Is it better than nothing? Sure, yes. But I think I'd much rather go by betting lines. If you're going to go by betting lines and then maybe use the median projection as a small, okay, just to have the win probabilities and something in there, I could see that. So I do use the median projections from 3 different sources, but only to basically stabilize the range of all the prices of fighters. It doesn't count for that much. Because obviously fighters but on average, more expensive fighters win more often. And typically they have higher inside the distance odds, right? So most likely I'm not going to find a $7,200 fighter that's going to rate out as the highest rated play on the slate, better than high price fighters. They don't win as often. So I'm much more likely to go by betting lines than by median projections that are normally distributed. If you could make projections with the fight data that aren't normally distributive, then you're closer. You're closer to what it should be. But even then, I think there's so much noise and so much not missed context in fight data that, look at Jacob Malkoun, for instance. First fight gets deaded by Phil Hawes. Gets 0 points. I mean, he lost in 18 seconds to Phil Hawes. Got knocked out. In the past 2 fights, who did he fight? He fought Dobson recently. Then before that, Razak Al-Hassan, who basically has no ground game. So Malkoun just goes and just spams takedowns. But he doesn't do much. He's not really a threat on the feet. And he's really not that much of a submission. He's not really that much of a submission threat. He is a submission threat on the ground. It's just that he doesn't have much power on the ground, so he just holds you down. So the past 2 fights, he's gotten 6 and 8 takedowns and just lays on top of you pretty much and stalls. Doesn't really do much because he could easily be controlled he could easily be reversed, that type of thing. So he just did that for 2 fights. And he scored 117, 131 in those 2 fights in decision wins. But those are the only 3 fights we have from data on it. That's it. You have 1 fight where he got 0 points, landed nothing, got knocked out in 18 seconds. The other 2 fights, he just laid on top of people. And two people that aren't grapplers, right? Dobson's a big guy, but Razak Al-Hassan, once you take him down, he doesn't do anything on the ground. So, like, how do you regress that? Tell me how you regress that. 3 fights worth of data. I don't know how you can. Is Malkoun going to take Allen down? Well, I mean, that's his path to victory, if anything. He's not going to survive on the feet. Is he going to have success against Brendan Allen? He's not going to have as much success as he did against Razak Al-Hassan. Probably not even as much as he had against Dobson. Allen actually can wrestle. So, like, yeah, he could spam takedowns and get nothing. Right? Or he could try and get reversed. Or Allen just knocks him the hell out. Malkoun comes in for a takedown. Couple of takedowns, doesn't get him, comes in for, his 4th attempt, gets uppercut, kneed, or whatever, and gets knocked out. And he's sitting there, and Malkoun is sitting there with, 3 points or something. And you're like, well, based on the past 2 fights, his range of outcomes, he has a really high ceiling. And, like, how could you take away from that in 2 fights with different context? This is not fighting Razak Al-Hassan. You're not fighting him. That's the point about all these projections, is that, extrapolating simulating 10,000 outcomes with 3 fights worth of data where you have matchup issues. I can't see how that's not flawed. It's something, sure, but it's flawed. Like, look at Della Maddalena. You look at his last fight, he scored, 115 or something? Knockdown, knockout, first round. That's his only UFC fight. Now, if you go back to previous to that, he's not a grappler, right? He stands on his feet, and he's a prospect, yes. He's only plus 265 to win inside the distance. I mean, he's a good money line for his price at 8,200. But if he's going to be like 30% owned, I mean, against Emiev, like, what's the ceiling of this fight? But his median projection looks good, right? So you're like, oh, well, he's a good median projection. Like, well, what's the chances of him putting up 100 plus points? I don't know, other than a first round knockout. But it's not like Emiev he's durable. And Emiev is going to go for takedowns and stall the fight and clinch and whatever. So if Maddalena doesn't get anything in the first round, he's dead. But he's going to be high owned. See, at least Steve Garcia wrestles a bunch. So you could get there's ways to get points. You get 25 points around 3 times and you're good. But like Della Maddalena, like, we take a look at Della Maddalena versus someone else. I mean, like, versus Kyung Ho Kang, like, these medians are close, but they're 2 totally different styles of fighters. And the data they have in the back are against different guys. Data from even people that have fought 12 UFC fights. Well, some of those fights are from 8 years ago. And then sometimes you look and it's like, okay, they have 12 fights, and 10 out of the 12 fights are against fighters that ended up being cut from the UFC. Then some other guy has 12 fights, and 10 of their fights are against people that are title contenders or champions. And you look and it's like, oh, he has 8 out of 12 losses in his past 12. Yeah, he's fighting for titles. He's fighting the top 2 guys in the division. This other person has 10 fights, and 8 of them are against people that aren't even in the UFC anymore. So how do you take that data and you go, okay, now I can make a range of outcomes between these 2 fighters, and have it not be noisy? So these normally distributive style projections for MMA are absurdly flawed, in my opinion. I'd be more likely to optimize based on inside the distance probability than by a median projection. Of course, the flaw in that is that you're going to miss out on grappling heavy fighters that go to decision, right? So like Jake Matthews for one instance, plus 405 inside the distance. Not very good, right? But Fialho, I mean, he's not known for, he has no ground game. You could probably take Fialho down and keep him down. Now, Fialho on the feet could light him up, right? Jake Matthews could get hurt really bad on the feet. But if Matthews gets the fight to the ground, at 7,700. Matthews could score 100 points, could legitimately score 100 points in a decision win. Fialho, the way to score 100 points is he needs a knockout in the first round, pretty much. Maybe the second round. He's not going to get grappling points. He's not going to get it. He's just getting striking points. So, like, these medians, it's like, yeah, Fialho has a median of 65 in our projections. Matthews has a median of 46. He has a 46 because a lot of outcomes are him getting 5 points because he got knocked out in the first round. He missed. He didn't get a takedown. And he gets killed in the first round. And then that's a lot of Fialho's outcomes. If he kills Matthews in the first round, he has a lot of 100, 110 point scores. If he doesn't get him out in the first round, he has a lot more 70s, 75s, or losses, or he ends up with 18 points and a loss. And Matthews ends up with 98 points. So, like, you're looking at, like, medians, like, we're not talking about scores that even exist in these ranges. Liang Na, 55 median. Like, in what world does she score? Yeah, she'll score 55 in a loss, possibly, in a decision loss. Liang Na doesn't score 55 in a win. That median doesn't mean anything. It's a bimodal outcome. That median, there's not much in that bucket in that range. So to use these median projections as a way of just going, okay, I'm going to go here. Let's see. We got everyone up here, and just go, okay, let me compare, like, do what we do for others, like NBA. I'm going to build 20 lineups with our current ownership projections, right? Let's say I'm going to build 20 lineups. I'm going to get rid of the player groups, right? Let me disable this. Build rules 1 or whatever. Like, build 20. Let's see. Let's just build 20 based on median projection. And obviously not stacking the fight. Okay. So the top projected lineup is Shevchenko, Jiri, Garcia, Kang, Na, Pascal. Now, obviously this lineup is going to be duped. So it's not necessarily I would want to play it. But, like, out of these 20 lineups, to do that exercise of, like, okay, I'm looking to play 3 lineups, right? And single entry or something, and go, okay, 200 at 403. Well, this is a little bit higher owned and has a lower projection. So let's get rid of it. Right? Get rid of this. We need to beat 200. 183. Okay. Can we beat 183? Right? We go by this. 183. Anything in the top 20. 183.30. Well, like, we could have used that one. For anything better than 183. That may be the best lineup in the top 20. So let's get rid of all of them below. Right? So we'd say that, oh, this lineup, for their projection, I'm saving 17 points in ownership and 2 points in projection. But then you look at this lineup. It's Shevchenko, Jiri, Allen, Na, Pascal, Joanna. This is going to be duped. You're not going to play this anyway. Right? So let's say we set an ownership number. Let's say, let me show you the top 20 lineups that have a max lineup ownership of 160. Right? It's kind of how we think in terms of, like, NBA or even MLB. And go, okay, compared to the projection, this median projection, 160, 159, 159, get rid of that, 156, anything that could be 156. Because as we're going down, we should have a lower ownership, right? We sacrifice projection, we should have lower ownership. 156, 157, 154, 158. Can we beat 150, 151? 144, 148. So we'd look here and go, okay, what about these lineups? Okay, a little bit less duplication. Probably it's a 50,000 lineup on an 11 fight card. This is probably duped more than 5 times anyway. So you have to consider that on top of anything. But if we go down and you go, okay, well, I'm going to play these lineups. This one's 373 projection, 144% ownership. It's Jiri, Edwards, Gomez Juarez, Dana, Emiev, Joanna. Much less owned. Okay, so I don't mind this. But it's like this projection number doesn't mean anything. Like, great. Jocelyn Edwards has a 66-point median projection. If I told you that I could guarantee you that Edwards has 90 points, would you take it? No. You're probably not going to win with 90 points at 8,700. So who cares what the median is? She's more likely, like Edwards is more likely to score 70 to 80 points, more so than Gomez Juarez, more so than Fiallo, truthfully. Like Edwards or Weili or so, like up like over here. Like Weili and Edwards on this slate are going to be low owned in this range. Low enough. I mean, not like 2% owned. They'll probably be around maybe 16 to 20 in this range. The problem with Weili and Edwards is that these are like the lowest ceiling fights. Most likely going the distance, and most likely not going to be grappling. So barring a first round knockout, like yes, if you want to have the best chance of getting like 75 points in your lineup, Weili and Edwards are fine, which is represented in their median projection. But their median projection is much more normal, right? Their projection is more normally just, it's not, it's still bimodal, but it's still, there's a lot more outcomes closer to their median. There's a lot more outcomes between, 45 and 50 and 80, right? 50 in a loss, 80 in a win for Weili and Edwards. But you don't care about either result. You don't want results in that near there. You want results that, you take a look at Silvana Gomez Juarez, and you're like, well, look at Gomez Juarez. She's a median of 65. Edwards median 66. Weili median 65. But they're all about the same. But Gomez Juarez's projection, range of outcomes, is much wider. Right? Weili and Edwards, 50 to 80. A lot more bulk of outcomes in that 50 to 80. While Silvana Gomez Juarez has a lot more 100-point outcomes and 20-point outcomes. But the middle ground is still 65. So, like, if you just go by median projections, you'll miss that. Silvana Gomez Juarez has a higher standard deviation based on how the betting lines of the fights. Plus 180 inside the distance. Mma is plus 160. This women's fight, the second fight on the card, low-level women's MMA has about the same odds of finishing inside the distance as the main event between Jiri Prochazka and Glover Teixeira, which is going to be a fast fight. Okay? So the second most likely fight to get a finish is this low-level women's MMA fight, which is very odd for a slate. But that means that, like, these median projections, like if you want to go by just a concept, the higher the odds are that the fight goes to decision, the more narrow the outcomes are. The more likely the fight doesn't go to decision, the wider the range of outcomes, right? One guy scores a lot of points, the other guy scores very little because the fight ends quickly. The fight goes 3 rounds, like this Weili Joanna fight is the most likely to go the distance in 3 rounds. So that's 50 to 80, especially when neither of them, Weili may implement some takedowns, but I doubt it. Joanna has great takedown defense. So yeah, barring a first round knockout, the bulk of the range of outcomes are going to be between 50 and 80. And in GPP, what do I care about those? I don't. Maybe I could 80 for the underdog. Maybe that could be optimal. Maybe, but definitely not for the favorite. That's why in the expert survey I said Weili is the one that I'm gonna have the least of. And even Jocelyn Edwards. The only difference between Weili and Edwards is that Weili is facing Joanna, your Jacek, however you pronounce it. And Jocelyn Edwards is facing Ramona Pasquale, who's hard. So it's more likely. I mean, if Jocelyn Edwards is plus 320, Pasquale plus 405. Like if anyone is going to get finished in the first round, I could see the Edwards Pasquale fight being shorter. But neither fight I'm looking to target all that much. But just based on the inside the distance lines, that's not. The median projection is going to look the same. Fiallo has the same median projection. Steve Garcia has about the same median projection. Steve Garcia is 66. But drastically different inside the distance lines. So yes, the median is 65, but not a bulk of the outcomes aren't around the median. The bulk of the outcomes are over here. It just so happens that 65 is the middle of these sets of outcomes. It was just one long way of saying the median projections. Don't worry about it. Kickstart, would averaging their ceiling projection and median projection on line of HQ maybe give you more of an idea who has a more realistic chance of getting over 100 points? No, because the whole range of outcomes is normally distributed. Like going by ceiling, like look, if we go by ceiling, I'm going to switch over to the ceiling projections. And it's not just RotoGrinders. This is how projections are done throughout the entire industry. So look, here are the ceiling projections. Yes, Whaley and Edwards are lower, right? But some of these are just laughable because they're still normally distributed. Like they're not that dramatically different, but they should be dramatically different. Jack Della Maddalena at 106 doesn't, if we say the ceiling projection is like the 80th percentile outcome, I'm not sure how many past 20 percentile outcomes is 106. I think it's much, much smaller than that because these aren't normal distributions. So these ceiling projections are still normal, part of a normal distribution curve. So it's not just median projections, it's also the ceiling projections. The distribution of outcomes for Zhang Weili and Jiri Prochaska are dramatically different. Dramatically. Just Weili and Silvana Gomez Juarez in this fight. And it's also in this fight. It's not just her. If Silvana Gomez Juarez was facing Ramona Pascual, she'd have a different range of outcomes. But she's facing Liang Na, who's a very aggressive, grappling, one round or bust submission type. So it depends on the fight. Della Maddalena versus a different opponent may have a different range of outcomes. Fialho and Matthews. If Fialho was facing another striker again, Fialho would have a much higher upside range of outcomes. So the matchup matters. So that's why these normal distributions, that's why I use them as a stabilizing method for the pricing. But other than that, I don't care that much about them. I care about how often do they score 100 plus points. That's it. I don't care what them 80 points doesn't do anything for me. How often did these fighters score 100 plus? No matter what their price is. I don't care. 6,600. She gets 65. I don't care. So this is the reason why I set up my sheet this way. But if I would care about anything, yes, it would be a ceiling projection. But the ceiling projection should be dramatically different from fighter to fight. You don't even want an 80th percentile. You want a how often do they get a 5th like what is that? You want almost a probability, not an actual number. How often do they score at least 100 points in a simulation that is not normally distributed? No projections do that, Colin. And the most correlative metric to 100 plus point scores are the ITD lines. I know they're not perfect, but they are more correlative than anything that I could find of any metric, of any fight data, mixing anything I can together. Simulate. I've seen other people's sims. And those fight data simulations don't come. You just go by a 50 plus slate sample and plot inside the distance versus 100 plus point scores. It has the highest R out of anything that I could find. So in the long run, I don't see why I'm not using them rather than trying to simulate fights punch by punch or something. There's just so much there's just so much insane variance. There's 10 times more variance in MMA than there is in PGA, and PGA there's a ton of variance. There may be more variance in MMA than there is in MLB, and that's a ton of variance. I don't think a lot of these projections take that into account. Much, much higher variance. especially with the smaller sample sizes. Oh, you got 3 fights worth of data. Yeah, I could regress that. Get out of here. Get out of here. But now it's time for you to get out of here. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. We got shows later today for baseball, right? MLB, Grinders live with Dean and the guys. We got Roth. Update all the, I don't know what's going on with weather today in baseball, but he'll update you on that in crunch time. If you want more on MMA, go subscribe to RotoGrinders Premium. All of the MMA content, other than what you've just seen right now, is for premium members only. You get the Ground and Pound podcast with me, Mike, H3 Buddha, Liam picks fights. We did a 2-hour breakdown with DFS strategy. Liam goes over some betting stuff. Mike throws his opinions in. It's a good watch, good listen. Mostly you should listen to the RG app or something. Then we got Mike's breakdowns, H3 Buddha's breakdown. Got the expert survey. Squirrel Patrol, maybe we'll have a contrarian take article. I don't know. I'm not tied in the loop. A lot of times on the pay-per-view cards, he does a little article on that. So if you want all of that, and also you want to be part of my Discord, right? The RotoGrinders Discord, I have my own channel. It's called Blender's Game Theory, right? We just talk about DFS strategy in there. And I also do coaching calls. So the next coaching call on Zoom, where you can just get on Zoom and talk with me with whatever the hell you want, live, audio, video, whatever, is Sunday afternoon. So Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. So if you subscribe to RotoGrinders Premium by clicking on the link in the description, getting $10 off your first month, you can take part in that. I post a link 5 minutes before. We get like 10, a lot of times it's 10 to 15 people on Zoom. It's like, anyone got anything they want to discuss? And I get one-on-one. It's one-on-one coaching in a group setting. And I do that typically 3 or 4 times a month now. So join that, join the Discord, hit the thumbs up button on your way out the door, and well, good, don't dupe me, right? Good luck in MMA, but don't dupe me, and I'll see you back on Monday, answering your DFS strategy questions like I always do on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.